What's up, people? Wake up. It's Saturday, 11 o'clock. Aquí estamos en el programa From the Neighborhood. Bienvenidos al programa donde nosotros llegamos a los vecindarios y entramos a conocer nuestro vecino. This is the one where you're going to get to know who's living next door, or at least the next borough, the next town, the next state. We're all neighbors, guys. We're all stuck in this big bubble called Earth. We're inside here and we got to get to know one another because while we're here, why don't we make it the most fun time of our lives? I mean, you only got one to live, so let's make it a good one by getting to get to know our neighbors. And I'm your guy. I'm your host. My name's Anthony. And you know, we're here every single week with a new person who's got some pretty cool story. I've got a guy who's going to come around from many different places, but Brooklyn is home. So if you're from Brooklyn, stand up, represent, feel proud, because that's who my guest is going to be today. They're going to be from Brooklyn. So with that, guys, I want to hear your stories. I want you to tell me what you're about, because as you know, the show is all about breaking apart the preconceived notions about where you're from. All those stereotypes. Cuando la persona dice, oh, tú eres de ese vecindario. You're from there? Well, you know what, man? I'm actually from a great place of town, or I'm a great person from that part of town. You should get to know me. I'm your neighbor. So that's what we do on this program. We get to know each other. We get to know who we are and what we're doing. Las cosas que son sorprendentes, las cosas que están creando un nuevo mundo, lo estamos haciendo aquí, lo estamos exponiendo aquí en este programa From the Neighborhood. So when somebody tells you, what's it like to live there? Get a real sense of the neighborhood from the people who actually live there that are coming onto this program. So with that, folks, if you guys got a friend, if you guys have yourself who maybe you've got a great story, nominate yourself or nominate a friend. Go to fromtheneighborhood.com. Get on my social, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, I don't know, whatever it is you find, just type in From the Neighborhood and say, hey, man, I got a story I want to share. And it's real easy, guys. If it's a great story, we're going to get you on here. We're going to talk to you. And we hope you can hold out for an hour and just tell us all about what you're doing, because we want people to know. We want people to connect. And if you guys don't want to be on the show, but you still want to represent your neighborhood, then I got some cool merch. Make sure you pick it up and represent, whether it's Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Staten Island, the Bronx, Long Island. You guys are here, man. We got your stuff. You guys can go ahead and represent your neighborhood. Pick it up in your size, or just pick up a water bottle or something like that so you can support while you're at the gym. We got tons of cool stuff. And the team here at Latino Mixx can help you get advertised. So if you guys want to get out there and get your business connected to people, well, we've got packages, we've got ways that we can develop engagement with the audience that's listening to us, with the people you know, so that they can go ahead and start making your phone ring, putting in those orders or whatever it is, showing up at your door, basically getting in touch with the people in your community, your neighborhood. So that's what we're doing, guys. And as I said, I've got a lot going on here. And trust me, all of you who are out there, you're all a friend of me, but I got to start the show with a little bit of energy, so I'm going to Public Enemy, and you know what it is. I'm going to bring the noise. Let's go.
De regreso con Anthony from the Neighborhood.
Yeah, that's right. Turn it up. Bring the noise. That's the guy right there, Chuck D, Flavor Flav. You know how it is. And with that, guys, I got to move on to the show. When I get into this music, man, I catch this energy and I just want to jump up and dance. And, you know, sometimes I do, and I got to catch my breath because I got to sit back down and talk to you guys. So, ya, señores, ustedes tienen la energía de hoy. Como ustedes saben, yo siempre le prendo esa música para que ustedes se despiertan y se animan. And while we're doing this program here, I can't stop but to thank the folks who are supporting the program, the sponsors. And let me go ahead and just drop the sponsor right here. So let's get that cue in there. Boom, there we go. And that's our sponsor. So our sponsor is Mortgage Depot, and that's Johnny Quinn. He's a loan officer. So if you guys got questions on refinancing, getting your mortgage application in, you're looking for your first home, reach out to Johnny Quinn, loan officer with Mortgage Depot. NMLS number is 133907, and you can reach him at 718-496-5216. That's 718-496-5216. Or you can email him. It's real easy. Johnny, it's the normal spelling, JOHNNY at mortgagedepot.com. So ya ustedes saben, señores, si están buscando casas, necesitan un préstamo, quieren refinanciar, llámate a Johnny Quinn en Mortgage Depot. El número de teléfono es 718-496-5216, 718-496-5216. Y regresamos al programa. Here we go. Back to the program. And I've got a guest who I just keep looking over here because this guy, man, this guy's got a great story and he's super chill. So, like, I know the music probably got him going, right? Because Public Enemy just does that. But let me introduce my guy. His name, he goes by the name of Jose Andrade. And he's known to many in the industry because he's just been around like that. And he's been a big contributor to the industry, kind of on a silent type. But guess what? If you were wearing something that represented hip hop or urban life and maybe a few other things, you probably probably had it done by Jose. So vamos a darle la bienvenida a Jose Andrade. And this is my man right here. This guy, he's the one responsible for most of the stuff you're wearing. BKNY Printing, if you guys from the industry are listening right now, that's the man right here. Welcome to the show, Jose.
Hey, thank you, Anthony.
Yeah, man. I'm glad to have you here, man. BKNY, represent Brooklyn. I'm born Brooklyn. Tell me about you, though. You skipped around a little bit. Brooklyn's where you started, but and shout out the neighborhood, by the way, because I'm going to go crazy right now.
Well, first of all, Anthony, thank you for having me here. It's an honor. It's a privilege. Super humble to be here. I was born and raised in Williamsburg in the early 70s, 72 to be exact. Was there until about 79. Then my parents decided to move out to the burbs. We lived out in East Patchogue, Medford area for a few years. And then my dad decided to embark an adventure in South America. My parents are from Ecuador, so we lived in Ecuador for about a year.
Yeah.
And then, unfortunately, my dad and my mom kind of split up and we came back. My mom came back with my brother and I. And she was pregnant with my sister, and we came back to Bushwick.
Yeah, that's the one I want to hear. That's it. I just wanted to hear Bushwick, and you know what? Yeah. I love Williamsburg. My parents grew up there.
Yeah.
South Side. Where were you guys?
We were on Metropolitan Avenue, between Union and Lorimer.
Hey, Kellogg's Diner.
Yeah,
the BQE right above you.
Yeah, exactly. Noisy area, busy area.
Wow. And Bushwick, where did you go?
We came back to Olive Street in DeVoe. I lived on DeVoe and Olive, right around the corner from Eastern District.
How was the White Castle burgers?
Oh, White Castle was on point.
Yeah. And KFC?
KFC.
You had the KFC there too?
Yeah.
Wow. So listen, you see where we're going with this, folks? Now, I had never met you. Like we met like now, right?
Yeah,
like just to say, I didn't meet you when I was a kid.
Oh.
You got a little more experience than I do, but like basically we were just like blocks away from each other.
Exactly.
You also lived in Ridgewood.
Yes.
Maspeth.
Yes.
Places where I grew up as well.
Yeah.
Right? Like we just cross a few blocks.
Yeah.
And we're in Queens.
Yeah.
And we never saw each other.
No.
But now the stuff you've been doing apparently has been seen by many, many more people. We're going to get to that. But I think one of the things that you mentioned there was living here than living there, like the contrasts of the place where you were living. How was that as a kid?
I feel like I lived on both sides of the fence, growing up in the city, inner city, the urban energy. I really got exposed to the influence of music, the 70s disco. And then when my parents moved out to Long Island, in the 80s, like 81, 82, that's when MTV first started coming out.
Where were you in Long Island, though? You say Long Island, it's a big island, man.
Yeah, we were. My parents bought a house in Bellport, Medford area, in 81, I think it was, and they basically had cable. There was no cable in the city at that time, and that's when I got exposed to like HBO and MTV at that time.
You had that box with the red dials?
Yeah.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, I remember, yeah.
You flicked the channels fast enough you could break through pay-per-view?
Pretty much, yeah. I don't think it was pay-per-view back then, but yeah, MTV was like a big influence, and like I got exposed to rock music. Yeah. Going to school out there in middle school and elementary school, I should say. And it was just a whole different vibe. There was really no Latinos out there.
No, but you're Latino. Andrade. Yeah. Let's represent. Andrade, where's the last name come from? Why don't we just shout it out?
For my understanding, it's a Portuguese, Brazilian last name. But both of my parents were born and raised in Ecuador. And, they're first generation out there. And, they came into the States like in the 70s. Yeah, man, living in Long Island, I got exposed to like a whole different lifestyle. I mean, just a lot more slower. You couldn't walk to the corner store. You needed a car to get around.
Isn't that crazy? Like, I always tell people, I'm like, listen, it's such a sharp contrast, but we're on the same island. Like Brooklyn, don't get it confused, guys. Brooklyn, Queens, Long Island, it's one island.
Yeah.
But there's such a stark contrast. Especially you said, what is it, Medford or something like that? Isn't that like Patchogue?
Yeah, Patchogue, yeah.
Yeah, you're all the way out. You're all the way out east. And I mean, I'm thinking to myself, like, if you're saying you can't necessarily walk to stores because there's no sidewalk.
No, there wasn't. I mean, in the early 80s, there was like no street lamps. You know what I mean? That's how rural it was back then.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So whose idea, by the way, was it to go to Patrick? How'd you discover this place?
I mean, I was a youngster. You know, it was my dad's decision to move out there. He worked in the fashion industry. He worked in the apparel fur business. So I think a lot of his managers, his bosses, all had homes in Long Island. And you know, you got to think about it when you look back at that time in the 80s. My dad bought a brand new construction, like a mother and daughter house, for like under $30,000.
Everything felt like it was super cheap. Like the money was worth something, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I in my opinion, I think it was expensive back then. You know what I mean? But like in stark contrast, you know, looking back to where we are now and looking back, I was like, wow, I had no idea like that house was worth $30,000, brand new construction. But it was just a whole different world.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get into some numbers here because you're a big business guy, and you know, I think that it was a beautiful alignment that your business followed your passion, you know, because I feel like the passion for what you were doing in all conversations that we've had has always been there. And then like moving forward, it was like the business landed into the passion versus the other way around, where sometimes a lot of people look at the passion and they're like, you know, oh, I'm going to become passionate about the business. But it's the other way around in what you were doing. You know, it's interesting to me because you also had other things that you were up to when you came back into the city. And I'm going to fast forward a bit with your permission. You know, you come back to Williamsburg and we start finding ourselves into things that you like, art and so on and so forth. And it leads to fashion. And fashion, by the way, is synonymous with our daily life, you know, to the point where like, you know, you can't separate the two, where at one point you start identifying what you're listening to, what you're eating, what you do on a daily basis based on fashion, right? Talk to me about when you came back. What were some of your hobbies that you would do in Brooklyn that kind of then started to, you know, make you more urbanite, right? More the city kid.
I mean, I think first of all, I've always into art. I always liked drawing as a kid. And, you know, as I was sharing with you earlier, like, you know, my mom would drop me off at a babysitter, and the babysitter's husband would always say, hey, this kid is like really, you know, into the art, and just kind of encouraging me. So my mom kind of led that. And when we were living, before we moved to Long Island, she would take me to the Brooklyn Museum for like art classes and stuff like that. So art always stood with me. But at the same token, I was always brought up with the idea of like the starving artist. Like I never made any connections. It was just more like a hobby, you know what I mean? So I kind of followed it that way. And when we got back from Ecuador, like in the early 80s, I was always into the art, but, you know, coming from Long Island before we moved to Ecuador, you know, just being exposed to like that suburban lifestyle, rock music, and that's kind of like where I picked up BMX bike riding. Like a lot of the kids that I grew up as a youngster.
Let's go through it. Hold on, we got BMX. What were some of the other brands that were out there? I remember Line. GT.
Yeah, I had a Redline, so like that was my first BMX bike. So
Dino
like,
bikes, Mongoose,
all that. So like when my parents split up and we came back to the States in the early '80s, I came back. And I bought, you know, I didn't go back to school. I went straight to work. I worked at a beverage company to make some money to buy me another BMX bike, because that was my thing. That was like my way to freedom. You know, I would be able to navigate, drive around, ride around the city. But my first bike was Redline. And then I was able to like connect with other Latinos that were in that same culture by accident in Greenpoint, and I'm just riding around, and that's how they knew me. Like that, growing up as a kid, like my nickname was Redline. You know,
Redline.
That was my nickname.
I want to stick onto the bicycle, because the bicycle is, you know, the bicycle itself. You know, it's a whole culture of its own.
It is,
and it has its own fashion. As a matter of fact, you know, did you have any favorite pair of sneakers that you used to wear when you were a kid?
Vans. I used to wear rock Vans.
You used to rock Vans,
and that wasn't a popular thing in the East Coast. That was a West Coast.
That was a West Coast thing. Yeah. So was a lot of the biking that you're talking about. But I gotta say, I had a few favorite sneakers. Like I used to love Reeboks. I still do.
Yeah.
Still Reeboks, right? Did you ever wear like LA Gear?
Nah.
You ever wear one of those? I had one of those when I was a kid. I had wear LA Gear sneakers. I was like, well, what is this thing? I wore Fila.
Fila was my thing.
Yeah, Fila a lot. Did you? There was another one. What's it called? Was it Essence or something like that? Like it had an E on it. I can't remember the name of it right now. Oh, I can't remember. But you know one that I do remember, which was big back in those days? Adidas.
Adidas, yeah, that was my first like quote unquote hip hop exposure.
I knew it
Shell
was.
Tops, yeah.
I knew it was, bro. And I have it right here lined up.
Yeah.
And I want to go to a quick break right now with this jam. And you know what it is. Run DMC, My Adidas. Let's go.
De regreso con Anthony from the neighborhood.
That's right. That's right. If you guys knew about sneakers back then, you definitely were wearing a pair of Shell Top.
Yeah.
Right? Shell Top Adidas.
Yeah.
You know, another one I remember was the Pump. Reebok Pump. That was a big deal.
I had those too.
Yeah. And then when I said LA Gear, actually, I was thinking of LA Lights. Remember those sneakers?
Yeah,
those were the
LA
first
Lights.
ones?
Yeah, I remember those.
Man, it's crazy stuff, man. You start thinking about like back in the day, like what were you wearing? Why were you wearing it?
Yeah.
But I still wear Reebok Classics.
Oh, those are favorites.
Those
bro.
are
comfortable.
Get it. You can't get rid of those, man. But let's take this on to like BMX riding.
Yeah.
You were talking. They were attaching this name Redline. While you're there, we're talking about 80s.
Yeah,
mid 80s,
early 80s,
early 80s,
like
right? So
80s.
around that time, we got the birth of MTV.
Yeah.
Right. You're starting to hear all sorts of music, but now you visually see music, right?
Yeah.
So like you know,
Aerosmith, yeah.
Yeah. Video killed the
Motley
radio
Crue,
star.
yeah, all that stuff. Yeah.
Talk to me about how's that an influence to you when you're growing up?
That was like my escape, man. You know what I mean? Like seeing my parents go through what they went through and then like coming back from Ecuador with nothing. It was like a way to kind of escape, man. Like I really got into the music. You know, when we came back to the city, there was still no cable. We didn't have cable. So like at that point, I got exposed to video music box with Ralph McDaniels.
Yeah, listen, cable was a luxury. I didn't have cable either. It was like we all used to go to somebody's house who had cable
out in the suburbs because it didn't exist back then in the early 80s in the city.
Man.
It was like a Long Island thing.
It was definitely a Long Island thing. I remember we used to come out to just be able to watch cable at my cousin's house because he had it, right? Señores, estamos hablando de un tiempo de que este muchacho, o sea, estaba aquí en los Estados Unidos, fueron al Ecuador, hicieron lo que hicieron, no tuvieron lo que querían hacer. Vinieron aquí a los Estados Unidos de nuevo. Estamos regresando al tiempo de que estaba en Brooklyn, o sea, donde comenzaron, después de vivir en Patchogue. Y todo en este tiempo, él queda con el sentido de artista. Right? You have this passion, this artist sort of thing going. It's a theme. It keeps coming up. He gets into BMX, o sea, montando bicicleta, tirándose. Como usted ve a los muchachos que usted dice, no, este muchacho se va a romper la cabeza. You know, that's what your mom probably said.
Yeah.
You're riding your bikes around. They think you're going to pop your head open. You're into artwork. You come across somebody who starts to be of an influence to you and exposes you to something, and you're like, you know what? My artwork or my artist crave has an outlet. Who's this person?
My friend Magic. He was one of the guys that I met when I was in Greenpoint, just riding around, and he was hanging out with a clique of other like-minded individuals. We were all like in our junior high school age. But he was the oldest, so like he was the first one that actually went to art and design.
It's funny that his name is Magic, and
his name is Frank actually. Frank. I can't remember his last name, but we all know him as Magic. But he was super talented. Like he would, there was this art technique called stipple, and it was just like doing little dots. And I remember seeing one of his artwork. It was Ron Wilkinson doing like this trick, and he literally drew it in this like portrait, but it was all dots. And I was like, what? Like, I was just blown away.
Wow. So we're talking about, señores, son cositas redonditas que él le hace así con el lapicero, así, le da como para hacer hoyo en el papel, pero
he created an image, yeah. It was just like a photograph. It was like, I thought it was a photograph. He was, I just did that with dots. And
this is like a BMX stunt.
Yeah, he was doing an actual BMX trick. Like he took a photograph from like these BMX magazines. And,
insane. Wow.
Yeah. And then I remember like, I want to see more. And I ended up going to his house in Greenpoint. He lived on Eagle Street.
Yeah.
And he showed me his portfolio. I didn't know what a portfolio was. You know what I mean? I was always into art. I was always drawing, doodling, whatever. But this dude, like...
So you were just picking up scraps. You were just doing drawings everywhere. But this guy goes ahead and introduces you to a space and says, listen, portfolio, you know,
the
styles.
Terminologies, styles, watercolors. And I was probably like 15 years old, 15, something like that.
Wow.
I was, at that time, I was in junior high school, 126, by McCarran Park in Greenpoint. And his younger brother I was going to school with his younger brother, and I think his younger brother invited me to the house, and that's kind of how I started seeing all of his artwork. And I was like, wow, like.
And you guys met through biking.
Yeah,
it was BMX stunt bike.
Yeah, through that culture. Yeah, like we would just ride. I was just like riding it. I think we met in McCarran Park, and I seen these clique of kids just doing tricks, and I just pulled up, and they were like, "Yo, you got the red line, da da da." They were like sweating my bike, and at that time, back in the '80s, like you were either being robbed for your bike.
I was gonna say, because that's what you get. That's the normal feeling you get.
but like fortunately, these guys were just super cool, man. Like it was Frank was the oldest one out of a clique of like 4 guys. It was a kid named Sandy, a kid named Louis. Louis was a Puerto Rican cat. He was amazing with the tricks. Like he was the first guy that I see him ride the ramps, like the quarter pipe ramps and catch air. Yeah. And they actually built a ramp in Honeywell in Long Island City. So like they took me, it was like a real down low key, and I guess they took a liking to me, took me under the wing, and we just started hanging out like every day after that first time.
Yeah. I felt like things like, for example, hip hop, things like BMX riding. Those things were kind of underground for a while. Breakdancing, right? For example, that was underground for a while, and it was like so many people were driven to it, but then there weren't facilities for it. There wasn't equipment for it. There was no outlets really, and you had to kind of make up your own space. So how did you guys craft McCarran Park to work for you?
I think it was a centralized space because I was living in Bushwick, so it was like literally like a 10-minute bike ride to that space. I like McCarran Park. I mean, it was just a place that you can ride, and then the guys from Greenpoint would just meet there, and then from there, what we would basically do, we would just meet there and then just ride around the city. Like we would go on Williamsburg, go into Manhattan.
That's when the Williamsburg had like metal plates on it, and it was like it was missing pieces.
It was pretty creepy back then. But and then like we would go to Steinway a lot because there was a bike shop that catered to us. You know what I mean? And we would just go there every other day to pick up parts for our bike or whatever, we just talk shop and just
That's crazy. Wow. So were you ever into like the comic book culture as well? Like with your drawing, with your artwork? Were you ever into that kind of thing?
Nah, I never got into it. What I really got into in the early 80s, I remember catching this documentary on PBS 13, Style Wars. And this is like during the VHS era. And I happened to have, I got lucky. I was able to like record this show, this documentary. And that's when I got exposed to like hip hop and the whole like the underground breakdance, b-boying, graffiti.
Wow.
Yeah. At the same time when I was like in
people
the BMX.
Need to know this because this is like, guys, you catching something on television is not what you see on TV today.
Yeah. It wasn't even on television. I think it was like some public access, like Channel 21.
But people don't realize that's a coincidence in life. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to get at. People don't realize. Yeah. Like you hit Netflix today and you just hit play whenever you want. It's on demand. You go online, you Google it. Yeah. But if you didn't catch that, at whatever time you caught it, and whatever channel,
like at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, I couldn't like sleep one night. Yeah, and I was just like, like what's this? And I recorded it, and then they played it again like a few months later, and I really got into it. I was just like, I started like just pausing the screen and just trying to copy these graffiti artists, and I must have been like 15 years old, like just following.
Pure destiny talking to you through a TV set. Yeah. Now, I want to get over to another guy who comes into your life. And literally, when you come through to this guy, you got magic in your life. Yeah. The person. All right. Yeah. And then this other guy that you come through your dad's involvement, through like your uncle, I'm sorry, your uncle's and neighborhood involvement and so forth. I don't want to let him out the bag, but literally with this guy, I could say you literally had to suit up. Because you were hitting the next level now where this was going to then start becoming to be the trajectory of your life. Yeah. Right? So I'm going to hit to a quick break right now. And I'm going to go with a Brooklyn guy, but he's featuring somebody else or vice versa. But Justin Timberlake, Jay-Z, Suit Up.
No te muevas. Regresamos en tan solo minutos.
Yeah, that's right. I'll show you how to do this. Or better yet, Jose's going to show you how to do this. Because with Jose, we've been learning a lot. And, I stressed something right before the break. And I said to myself, people got to know this. They got to know that television or whatever came on the radio when they wanted to put it on the radio, not when you want to watch it. It wasn't on demand. You couldn't press play. You couldn't go back. This is a time where you had to be attentive. And I remember when I used to mess around with the radio, I basically would just drop the volume on the DJ so that I could talk like I'm the DJ and then try to put it up when the song came up. And man, I can't tell you how many times I had to overwrite the cassette that I was recording because it would never come out right. You just never knew. And I recorded so many of my favorite songs with the commercials in them, right? With the DJ shouting because I didn't even know. So Jose, like, let's go back to something like We're talking about mid 80s, 90s. You got hip hop getting real crazy. You got punk rock. We got graffiti. We got house, freestyle. Like all of this stuff is happening.
Yeah.
No internet. How's this stuff getting around?
Man.
It's like
the power of that, right?
It's like you had to be out all night.
Yeah. You had to be out there. Yeah.
How were you out there, man?
I wasn't really out there in the 80s. I was still kind of young. But I had access, obviously, to a radio, TV. I think one of my biggest influence was like, the video music box and then the radio. I was listening back then was like BLS and Kiss FM, Yeah. So I would follow that. And then slowly but surely, like as I got older, through going to school, like I ended up meeting some club kids, and their older brothers would go to like Palladium and freaking the Red Zone, and that's kind of like how I got exposed to that era.
Yeah, Funkmaster Flex Nights, hard to get a ticket.
Yeah. It was that type of vibe, you know what I mean? And like, through that network, I was able to, be at the right place at the right time.
That's crazy. I saw when Rosie Perez was on the show with David Letterman, they mentioned the Palladium. That's why I thought about it right away. And people look at it now and they think, oh, that's cute, that's novelty. But listen, we had to talk to people. Yeah. So you connected with this guy Magic. Somehow this gets you prepared to meet your next guy here. What's his name?
Through my uncle, I met this who kind of exposed me to the actual technology of screen printing was Jose Fuentes.
Jose Fuentes exposes you to the technology of screen printing.
Yeah, he gave me a shot. He gave me a job. Through the help of Magic, I was able to put together a portfolio. And with that portfolio, my uncle was involved with the Lions Club, which is an organization of entrepreneurs that would raise money to help the unfortunate in South America. So through that network, that's how I connected with Jose Fuentes. And, I went there for a summer job. He was needing some help, some internship, and he set me up with an interview. I came with my portfolio, hired me right there in the spot, and kind of took me under his wings. I worked with their art department, learned cut films, Ruby cameras. Like, this is before computers, man.
No, man. And I want people to know this. Like, if you got a kid who's at home who likes to draw, he's riding bikes, he might be the next guy who's running a thing like what you're doing here. Yeah. And let me just highlight again, we're talking about BKNY Printing. We already know in the industry where that's been. But if you guys didn't know, it probably came out of his shop. So this guy, Jose Fuentes, is the first one to introduce him to this screen printing process.
Yeah.
But are we talking about computers?
No. He was doing textile printing. So he was doing fabric printing, banners.
No computers.
No computers.
No tech.
Everything was just literally old school stat cameras. Like, he had like a big factory in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. He used to work with dark rooms, films, and just like the core technology of screen printing, And this is like just printing on bed sheets and like, textile. But I took that science and I just kind of was like, maybe I can use this technology to print T-shirts. I was back then, growing up, I was always into Ocean Pacific, those like surfer shirt brands and like the flowers and all that. So I kind of was into that culture back then, coming up in the 80s, into the BMX culture and stuff like that. And then when hip hop came into the picture, it was like a mix between like La Tigre shirts and like the Lees and all that. They really didn't push the printed stuff. It was more like a rock and roll stuff.
Yeah.
But the BMX kind of created that lane to help me see like that opportunity.
That's interesting. I never would have thought like, you would see such a convergence, of styles, and then like, I don't know, for some reason things just started blossoming. It was like weeds in a garden. It was like all of a sudden, you get that, how do you call it, that one that you blow and it spreads everywhere, like that brown one.
Yeah.
It felt like that with regards to fashion at that time, because everybody had a house to belong to.
Right.
I don't think anybody really felt like left out, because you were part of something based on like your style.
Yeah.
Based on how you
your lifestyle,
how you suited up, right?
Yeah.
Your suit and tie, what you wear.
Yeah.
And this guy Jose Fuentes exposes you to this sort of thing. But you still didn't get into the space of hip hop and all this other stuff. This comes later on.
Yeah, I was just during that time I was kind of mindset was like the starving artist. Like I didn't know what I got to a place as I got older, 16, 17, I was like, I got to figure out what am I going to do for a living.
What do you tell kids nowadays that they just don't know what they got to do for a living, and maybe they have a skill like this, but they don't know where to express it that they can make a living?
Yeah, I think it's a little different today. You got YouTube. I mean, there's so much technology out there. You know, I think just figuring out what you would want to do that you love to do, that you didn't have to get paid for, and then figure out a way to monetize that. I think that's the best simple advice that I can give, because that's what I did. I kind of was like, okay, you know, I got this skill, I got this job, don't want to print bed sheets for a living, but like I kind of figured it like, all right, how can I monetize this? How can I adapt this to what I like and who I appreciate? I was into music, into hip hop. I liked the BMX culture. And I just basically, I got a job to learn a little bit more in the t-shirt industry as I moved on and progressed out of high school. So my first job in the sleepwear was this company called Continental, and I worked there for about a year and learned a little bit more about t-shirt printing, mass production, automation.
This is all happening in Brooklyn.
This all happened in Brooklyn, like probably like literally 1990 or 1980.
Man, I'm so proud. I'm so proud.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about Kent Avenue when there was nothing but factories and crackheads. And
yeah. You know, I had my wedding reception on Kent Avenue, Giando's.
Yeah. So Giando's was probably a few blocks from the factory that I was working on North 5th or something like that.
Yeah, because everything else was a warehouse. You know, you had...
It was a big warehouse.
Sugar was actually coming out of Brooklyn, Domino Sugar, right?
Yeah. And none of those big high rises that we have or see today, none of that existed.
Imagine that,
like,
guys.
Who knew? Like, I had no idea, man. Like,
wow.
I had no clue. And I remember, at that point, I worked there for a year. I trained this kid, I think his name is Carlos, and he had no skills, super talented drawer, and, he got fired a couple of months before me, and he started working at a job in Staten Island called Plymouth Mills. So when I got fired at the Continental, I called him up and I told him what happened. He got me an interview the next day. I got hired and I started working at Plymouth Mills like in 91 or something like that. And Plymouth Mills was like this whole other beast. Like it was like a vertical operation, meaning like they would literally buy the fabric, make the patterns, cut it, make the sweatshirts, print it on site. And it was like a husband and wife team from like the 60s. And from what I heard, the husband used to do bootleg Grateful Dead T-shirts, a big pot smoker, drove a Range Rover, and it was 91, and then during that time, that company was blowing up. Like they were growing, and they were hiring people and graphic artists, and they were expanding, and they were hiring a lot of cats from a lot of guys from FIT, and that's how I met Rich Bravo and. They
were putting in a lot of talent into Staten Island, because Staten Island is a place that normally gets forgotten. Yeah. And it's like, what borough? So the reality is I think that once people set up a business that, accommodates to a certain culture, that accommodates to a group, you start attracting that there, because one is people want to monetize. Number two, right? They have to make a living. But I think that this gives them an outlet where they feel like they have an effect onto an industry or onto a market. Yeah. You found yourself with other people that, had artistic skill, or in some way, some form were connected also to the cultures or the interests that you were connected to. Who were some of those people that just immediately you gravitated to or gravitated to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's where I met Willie Esco. I met Rich Bravo, and through them, that's how I met Danny Hastings.
He was on the show.
Yeah.
He was on my show. Yeah.
So that's my boy. Yeah,
big hip hop photographer.
Yeah.
So hold on. Staten Island, Danny Hastings. He worked Wu-Tang.
Yeah.
Wu-Tang's from Staten Island. Yeah. Is there a connection?
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember one day Richie and Willie and his other brother Santiago were like, hey, we got a side job. We're gonna be working with my boy Danny. He's gonna be doing a photo shoot for this new group. And I just kind of tagged along. I didn't stay that long for the actual shoot, but they were literally down the block on Tompkins Avenue to the projects that they were shooting at. And I was like, I don't know about this. And but I also at the same time.
And this is the Wu-Tang.
Yeah,
this is was it one of their first photo shoots? What album was it for?
The first album, the Chambers, whatchamacallit, 36 Chambers.
36 Chambers.
Yeah. That was literally the first album. I didn't stick around because the division that I was working for, it was like a young kids division, and I had to go to drop off some work in Park Slope, and that's how I got started. The shop that I was working with was a mom and pop shop. It was a husband and wife team from Ecuador, and they didn't speak any English, and my boss didn't speak any Spanish. So like she asked me to just go there, drop off work, communicate, drop the films, make sure that they had everything in place. And I was doing that for about 6 months. But that day I was gonna go be a part of that, but I couldn't. You know, I decided to just go do my job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I missed out. I wasn't physically there, but the next day or two, they were like just talking about like, yeah, we put these candles here. They were just giving me the whole backstories of everything.
That's Danny's famous shot.
Yeah, no, man, that's that
with like the socks or something on their face.
with the candles in the background. Yeah, that all took place.
You were there for that.
I was there temporarily. Yeah, I was gonna be there for the whole shoot, but I wasn't a part of it.
So you got to see the logo?
I got to see the logo, and honestly, I remember I was like, "Who the f is Wu-Tang? Like, what the like? I didn't get it. You know what I mean? Like,
wow.
It was they were just on another level. You know what I mean?
Insane. Yeah, definitely on another level. I mean, listen, I think that's probably like, what was it? Your first exposure to like actually being on a set, seeing what's happening in this space.
Yeah, I mean, it was, you know, but like I was so innocent and naive to it. Like I didn't know what it was, and you know, at that present time, it was just like whatever. I was always in these different situations that I always took for granted, and then when I look back on it, I was like, yeah, I was a part of that. Like it was just so nonchalant.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like I never really got to like look at it. I wasn't really starstruck or anything like that. I just didn't know. Like these were just like grassroots artists that were just coming together and just doing shit.
Yeah, look at it now, right? It's insane. Now, if you look at this, where you're going to, you know, constantly making this trip, Staten Island to Brooklyn to this family, how did this play a part, right? Like you're doing something that, you know, you had a skill, another language, right? You were able to basically barter or be a liaison. I'm sorry, for the business interaction.
Yeah.
You're coming to Brooklyn. What happens with this family, this mom and pop that were working with?
So the husband, his name is Guillermo Ramos, and God bless his soul. He was like in the period. He was doing it for a long time. He was doing the printing business he was at a place in his life where he wanted to retire, and he didn't have any sons. So I think, as I look back on it, like he took just a special liking to me. He was just like, yo, you know, none of my daughters want to take over. I want to go to Ecuador, maybe, you know. And this actually happened later on. Like it was more about like, hey, I can't take work from you for a minute because I'm gonna get a new machine, a new printing press. You know, it was all done by hand. And he was like, I'm gonna sell this one to this guy. And I kind of paused him. I was like, no, I'll buy that machine. And I remember at that time I had like other side jobs, and I had like stacked up some savings. So I think he wanted like $3,000 for the press. The next day I was like, yo, here's the money. I borrowed my uncle's station wagon. My uncle had a building in DeVoe Street in Bushwick.
Yeah.
And I told my uncle about the opportunity. He was like, yeah, you know, if you want, here's the station wagon. Me and my cousins like broke down the machine, put it in my uncle's station wagon. And I set up shop in my uncle's basement.
Let's go, man. Hold on a second. Don't even go any further, bro, because right now we stepping into the major leagues, and I'm going to hit it off with a song that you like, Kanye West. We major. Let's go.
De regreso con Anthony from the neighborhood.
That's right. Come on, homie. We major. And I got this guy, Jose Andrade, and he's on this whole nother path now. Like, forget about it. And I had to do that for Brooklyn. Forget about it.
Yeah.
He's on a whole nother path now. So screen printing comes along. You buy this machine. This guy takes a liking to you.
Yeah.
You know, you put in dedication. These are years later. Yeah. You know, and tell me, when does the time that the doors first open? Because you're in your uncle's basement, right?
Yeah, I was like 19.
The doors opened up at 19?
Well, at that point, when I first got the machine, like I think at that point, I decided, I was like, by the time I'm 21, I had like started creating goals. I didn't know what that meant back then, but like in my head, I was like, man, I want to be like my boss. Like I don't want to work for nobody. This is what I want to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And from that point out of the basement, what I did was I created some business cards, and this is back when the pagers, like the beepers. I put my beeper on it, and I put my logo Jose on it, whatever, and I just printed out massive amount of cards, and I just started networking, started giving them out. And one of my first official customers was this school, this new alternative school that came in the scene in the 90s, El Puente. And shout out to Edgar Miranda, who was like...
Puente's in Williamsburg.
Yeah.
Yeah, right before the bridge. I know exactly where it was at.
Yeah, that was my first official customer.
Yeah, because my parents were on like South 3rd Street. So, get out of here. So hold on, Miranda...
Edgar Miranda, you definitely
La Borinqueña.
La Borinqueña, yeah, that's my boy.
Oh my God, I met this guy a long time ago. Yes, I haven't seen him in a long time, but he had a place on Grand.
Yeah, he's still there.
Oh man, small world.
So he was my first like connection. Like he was actually good. He was good friends with Q-Tip from Tribe Called Quest.
Wait, shut up, man. This is crazy. This kind of stuff doesn't. Man, this is from the neighborhood, people. Like how is this happening right now? I just had a
So I'm printing T-shirts out of my basement. God. I'm hanging out with these club kids during that time. I remember I met through my first business partner, Dominic. He grew up with this guy named Mixx. And Mixx, he looked like George Michael. He was just this pretty guy, like just hanging out at Nell's, all these nightclubs. And through that network, I met this artist. Mixx used to call him White Boy Ben. And White Boy Ben did this logo for these DJs, Bobbito and Stretch Armstrong. And that was like my second client.
Wait, what was the first thing you've ever printed?
It was El Puente. It was the
El Puente was the first thing printed.
El Puente logo, yeah. That I got paid for. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And then hip hop was Stretch Armstrong?
Bobbito and Stretch Armstrong, the 89.9.
Oh my God, legends.
I didn't know at the time, man. Like I didn't know that Bobbito and Stretch was the first like college radio hip hop dedicated station in the culture in that era. And they played the first Wu-Tang song. So like I'm like on the back end of like seeing Wu-Tang being generated, developed, and then I'm doing shirts for Bobbito.
Wow.
Like it just was like, wow. Like
everybody's going crazy for merch, right? Like
it wasn't even like that at that point.
What were they doing with it?
They were just promoting. They just wanted merch. Like it wasn't a thing. It was just like, hey, I can do shirts. I can put your logo on it, and that was like my hustle.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Was that your pitch? Was that like your 5-second elevator pitch or whatever?
Yeah. So I do T-shirts. I'm out of Brooklyn. I didn't say I was working out of my basement. I was like, hey, I'm based out of Brooklyn. I can get it. I'm your direct source.
Yeah.
I remember through my uncle's little social network, I met this other guy. His name is Jimmy, and he used to import flowers, and he had a couple of businesses. He was a very successful guy. He drove a Mercedes, and I asked him, said, hey, what's the best advice you can give me? He's like, never deal with the middleman. Never deal with the middleman. Always buy direct. And if you can sell yourself that way, you're gonna be rich. Wow. And I was like maybe 17 years old. This is before I even decided, and I had just got the job at the screen print shop at Jose Fuentes spot. But I always kept that advice. So that was my pitch. I was like, hey, I'm your direct source.
Yeah.
Like, I physically print your shirts. And
that's awesome.
That was my hustle.
I want to fast forward a little bit from when you open your doors to then you establish yourself in Park Slope, Brooklyn, right?
Yeah. So Park Slope, Brooklyn was the mom and pop shop that I used to always send the subcontract work.
So that's where you were?
Well, I started out of my basement when I bought the machines from Guillermo Ramos. And he wanted to retire. So he was like, hey, Jose, I want to go back to Ecuador. Would you want to buy my business? So long story short, I ended up taking over his shop in 1994.
Yeah.
And one thing that I want to just share with your audience, like the importance of a mentor. You definitely want to find a mentor. And he was like one of my first mentors. He kind of showed me how to, set up and deal with employees. He had like 2 part-time employees. The financing, dealing with the vendors, like he stood on board with me for about a year until he, kind of retired and went back to Ecuador. But that was my first location. That's when we first like started. And I took on my child, my junior high school buddy friend. He was also Ecuadorian, and he was also ambitious and stuff like that. And so he was working a night job. He was like a door person at night. But he had his days free, but I had a day job at that point. At that point, like from Staten Island, I got a job in a licensing company doing apparel in the Empire State Building when I first took over the spot in 1994.
Wow.
So I told my boy Nick, I was like, Nick, I got this opportunity. Would you want to come in with me? So me and him like put in like $2,500 with $5,000. We gave the Guillermo like $5,000 down and worked out a payment plan. And he stood on board. And so he kind of ran help me run the shop in the daytime, but I would come after work and I would work all night, like
Man,
6 days a week. That was my hustle.
That's crazy. Wait, let's fast forward it now because you're still in Brooklyn, and I want people to know where to find you and how to connect with you. So, why don't you do me a quick favor?
Yeah.
Canarsie, Brooklyn. Big shout out to Canarsie.
Yeah.
Shout out where you're at. It's no more your uncle's basement.
Yeah.
You know, times came through and you actually set up your own location. And big applaud to this man right here for actually buying his location.
Yeah.
He owns this place. You got a permanent residence at this point.
Yeah.
In Canarsie. How can people find you?
We're at 1039 East 92nd Street in Canarsie, Brooklyn. We just expanded. We got another location setting up right now in Bushwick, 500 Stack Street.
Man, another round of applause for this guy.
Yeah, we've been very, super humble, super grateful. Yeah.
Yeah, and online, how could they find you online?
BKNYPrinting.com.
All right, there you go. And you got an Instagram or anything like that?
Yeah, same handle, BKNY Printing. You can find us on Instagram, social media.
My man's doing it. And I want to go ahead and get a special question out so that we can get to know this guy a little bit better through my random box that gives me a question that I don't know what it's going to be. He doesn't know what it's going to be. And we're just going to be able to see a little more inside this guy. But definitely, listen, Jose, this we got to go to the shop. We got to do something here. I like this. I really do.
Thank you, man. Appreciate that.
Part of our show is sponsored. So let me just get that cue real quick. Boom. We don't know what the question is going to be, but we're going to pull one out. And that's all thanks to our sponsor from Mortgage Depot, Johnny Quinn, loan officer. Give him a call, 718-496-5216. His NMLS number as a loan officer, his NMLS number is 133907. And if you have any questions, whether refinancing, getting a home equity line or whatever it is, call him, 718-496-5216. Ya ustedes saben, Johnny Quinn habla español, le puede ayudar con cosas de hipotecas, refinanciamientos, lo que sea. Él está con Mortgage Depot. Comunícate con él al 718-496-5216. 718-496-5216. Let's get into this question right here and let's figure out what is in store for you. I don't know, man. This question just is a random stuff, man. Do you have any superstitions? Especially a guy in business like you, man, with all the things that have come in and out of your life. I mean, any superstitions? Any special things you do to get you good luck before you have that client meeting?
I don't know if it's a superstition, but I pray a lot. I always look at the higher power.
Yeah.
And I believe in karma. You do good. You get what you give.
Right.
You know what I mean? But as far as superstition, I don't know.
It could be that thing you do right before. I know, for example, like there's certain things that I got to feel like I'm just right with it. Like the belt has got to be on that certain notch around your waist so that you feel like it's just right. So you feel like, I'm holding it down right now because sometimes you didn't do a double knot on your laces and you feel like I didn't really do my tie, And I remember when I would play baseball, like I'd have to have like, for example, a certain sock.
Yeah.
Like I would always make sure that socks was clean or that wristband. Like there was something that you felt like this is going to give me a good game. Yeah. I always felt like there was certain things. And I know like having faith is probably the most important. It's not a superstition.
I think
but it is.
All right. So when I say prayer, I think I remember as a kid and living in my uncle's building, like in the early 80s, I remember one time I did not pray before I went to bed and the house went on fire. Like that's so like ever since that experience, like I always pray every night before I go to bed. Like I was raised as a Catholic, but then I got I got born again through Christianity and all that, and I always pray. And this one night, I remember my parents was out, like they were still trying to make things work or whatever. They were out in Long Island, and this one night, I just like I remember going to bed late, and I was like, nah, whatever. And that same night, like at 3 o'clock in the morning, like my grandma just waking me up, like we have to evacuate the house, like the house is on fire. The first apartment was like flame, bro.
Damn, Jose, you took this to another level, man. Yeah, so everybody, pull out whatever it is you pray to, and make sure you pray and give thanks. I want to give you a big thanks, by the way, for being on this program. I took two things away from you right here that I want to share with my audience. And you mentioned about the middleman, which I totally understand, but getting to the source, which was a mentor, Magic, Jose Fuentes, Guillermo Ramos, big people in your life, not to mention the rest of your family, your uncle giving you the space. You always found yourself to a direct source of somebody. I wish you many more accomplishments. Congratulations on the new space, by the way. Señores, aquí estamos en este programa para que usted conozca a tu vecino. Estamos conectando con gente siempre. Agradezco mucho su tiempo y que lo haya compartido conmigo. So I'm really happy you guys got to know another neighbor and got to connect with your community just a little bit further through this program. And until next time, folks, I'll be seeing you back in the neighborhood.